Welcome to part 3, where we're going to talk about board composition and control. Who really runs your company? You're the founder and the CEO, and you own 60% of the company, but you just lost a very crucial vote, 3-2, at your board meeting. How is that even possible? So, the board composition is not just about counting seats, it's about understanding voting control. It's about understanding what the protective provisions can be and who really makes decisions when it matters the most. In section 1, we talked about anti-dilution provisions and liquidation preferences, but now we are going to talk about board composition. It determines who controls a major company decisions. Most founders, they think maintaining board control means having more seats than investors. While that is true, that's only part of the story. I've analyzed cases where the founders, they lose control despite having board majorities. And then there are others where they maintain control despite the fact that they are minorities. So the board control, they operate on multiple levels beyond just seat count. So there are some typical board structures I want to talk to you about. You can have a Series A, let's say we have a 5-person board. You have 2 founder seats, you have 2 investor seats, and 1 independent director. It sounds balanced, right? But investors often influence the independent director selection. Series B, let's look at a 7-person board. You have 2 founder seats, you have 3 investor seats, and you have 2 independent directors. Founders are now outnumbered, even with independent directors. So the board approval matters, Your board must approve major decisions. Like what? They will approve your annual budget over certain thresholds. They'll approve your hiring and firing of senior execs. They'll approve raising additional capital. They'll approve M&A activity. They'll approve major partnerships, so they'll review contracts and approve them. They will definitely look at equity compensation plans in every board meeting. They have the ability to change company charter or the very bylaws. So what are the protective provisions to establish real control? Even without board control, the investors can step in and they get veto power over certain decisions. And some of the common protective provisions by the investors in the board would be like, hey, on issuing new securities, on amending charter or bylaws, on paying dividends, on incurring debt above certain amounts, on related party transactions, and on the liquidation or sale of the company. These require investor approval regardless of board composition. So let me give you a real world example. So if you look at founder control board, you have 3 founders, you have 2 investors, and they want to issue employee stock options. They need investor approval. There's a protective provision that kicks into gear. If you want to hire an expensive new CTO, you will need board approval, because of the 5% majority. If you take on a $2 million credit line, you need the investor approval as part of the protective provision. Founders have board control, but they might have limited decision-making power depending on how it is structured. Now, you also have something called the board observer rights, and these are investors who often negotiate observer seats for additional partners. Yeah, they cannot vote, but they can certainly influence discussions. They have access to all of the board materials. They participate in executive sessions, and they do carry information rights. What are they? Board members get access to monthly financial statements, annual budgets and business plans, major contract details, and also the customer and employee information. This creates ongoing oversight beyond formal meetings, way beyond formal meetings. And there are certain dynamics, board meeting dynamics. People, they coalesce on the voting side. There are voting coalitions. The independent directors will often align with investors on major decisions. And why? because they're typically chosen for investor approval and business experience. Then there are executive sessions, board can meet without management present, to discuss CEO performance. They might want to discuss certain executive compensation plans, some strategic sensitive matters. So the chairman role is very, very important. The board chairman controls the meeting. It sets the agenda. It creates a timing of the discussions. They sometimes do the tie-breaking vote in some structures. So it's important for a founder to fight to maintain a chairman role or negotiate being a rotating chairman. There are certain escalation provisions that I want to talk about. Some term sheets, they include automatic board changes based on company performance. And you have to look out for those changes. If you miss a revenue target, investors will get additional board seats. You know what that means. If you fail to raise the next round, board composition shifts. Okay? The removal provisions kick into gear. Board can typically remove CEO and other execs, even founders. With investor board control, the founders can be fired from their own companies. Let's talk about drag-along rights, okay? So if majority shareholders, including, let's say, brand-appointed reps, they want to sell, they can force all shareholders to sell at the same terms. And they pull in new strategies, protective strategies, I call it. They negotiate the founder board control as long as possible. Carefully vet independent director candidates. These are protective provisions that the founder should do. Limit the protective provisions to truly make for major decisions. Negotiate performance-based board changes very carefully. And maintain a very strong relationship with all these board members. So how the founders navigate the relationship with the board member is very important. If you do well, it's great. If you don't do well as a company, then there are certain changes that might happen. Board composition and control provisions determine who really runs your company when difficult decisions need to be made. Seat count matters, no doubt, okay? But keep in mind there are protective provisions and voting coalitions that matter more. Focus on maintaining decision-making authority over day-to-day operations while ensuring and accepting investor oversight on major strategic decisions. At the end, the goal is really partnership, not getting into battles. So next week, we're going to talk about this a lot of questions I'm asked, option pools, the stealth dilution that affects every founder's ownership percentage. There are a lot of questions that come my way on that. So I'll just share a small video on that matter. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.